Hello and welcome to the Last Looks podcast, a show where we catch up with talented hairstylists and makeup artists in the film and television industry. We'll pick their super creative brains and find out all the good stuff. Join me, your host, Jamie Lee, in finding out what's what in the hair and makeup departments around the world.
And now, a word from our sponsor.
Mio Cosmetic Cases are the preferred safety touch-up system for pro makeup and hair artists. As makeup and hair professionals, we are constantly having to carry an endless amount of products in our kit, always in search of new ways to condense our kits and increase efficiency on the job. Mio Cosmetic Cases offer on-set touch-up kits that hold multiple types of makeup, helping you save valuable touch-up time on set, keeping your makeup safe and hygienic for talent, and significantly lightening your travel and set bags. They also offer depotting storage palettes in various sizes that assist to reduce weight and bulk in professional artist kits. A committed and globally verified environmentally conscious company, Mio Cosmetic Cases allows you to feel empowered that when using our products, you are committing to save the planet one small act at a time. Join the Mio movement today at myocosmeticcases.com. Mio Cosmetic Cases, meticulously designed with pros in mind.
And now, our feature presentation.
Okay, it's Oscars time, and of course, the Last Looks podcast is all up in that business. We have 5 bonus episodes where I'll be catching up with all 5 teams nominated for their superb makeup and hair work. All teams are asked the same set of questions, but of course, they all have very different answers. The Oscars makeup and hair lineup for 2023 is All Quiet on the Western Front, The Batman, Black Panther Wakanda Forever, Elvis, and The Whale. The 95th Academy Awards will be presented at the Dolby Theatre in Los Angeles on Sunday, March 12th. Thanks for listening and supporting the podcast, guys. It really does take a lot to get all these teams together to be able to bring these bonus episodes to you. With everyone working and shooting all over the world, as you know, it's hard. It certainly takes time and effort, so for that, I'm thankful to you, the listener, and all my guests. And a big shout out to our sponsors. We thank you for your continued support. Sponsors of our Oscars special episodes are Hands Down Refresher and Sanitizer, John Blake's Wigs and Facial Hair, Lux Skin FX, Melanie Mills Hollywood, and Mio Cosmetic Cases. I hope you enjoy these special episodes as much as I did putting them together.
Pictures up.
Last looks. Rolling.
And action.
Welcome to the Last Looks podcast team.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations on your Oscar nomination for your work on the film The Whale.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so let's do some introductions. If you could each tell us your name and what your position was on the team.
My name is Adrien Morot. I designed the character of Charlie, supervised the fabrication of the prosthetics for the makeup, and applied it on set with the help of Kathy C. and Annemarie Bradley.
My name is Annemarie Bradley, and I was the hair department head on The Whale, and I did Charlie's wig and hair on The Whale.
Awesome. That's amazing. So I always love to know how this goes down. On the day that the nominations are announced, are you guys watching the announcements? Are you trying to busy yourself with work? Are you even paying attention that this is happening? So, Adrien, tell me, how did you find out you had been nominated?
This time around, I'm on the West Coast, so the nominations came in really early. And
Yeah, it's crazy.
At that time, and like I said, 5:30 in the morning, and I was not on looking at the screen waiting for that. We're working right now on 3 shows at the shop, so I was working late the night before at the shop, as I always do, and I was sleeping, and my alarm clock rang at 6 o'clock, and I grabbed my phone shortly after to look at what my work schedule was with all the different production that we're working on.
Yeah.
And I had a text message from Brent Fraser, who was congratulating me for the nomination, which was very nice of him. And then I was like, oh my God, this morning So I went online to look if he was nominated.
Mm-hmm.
So that I could either say like, "Ha ha ha, loser, you didn't get in," or say congratulations back to him.
Nice. An educated response.
Yeah.
And Anne-Marie?
A friend of mine asked me if I wanted to, she was finally off for a day and she said, "Do you want to go get a manicure and a pedicure?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah, sure." And then I realized it was the day they were making the announcements. And I said, you know what? Actually, no, I can't go. Why don't you come over and have coffee and we'll watch it? And so I was actually watching it live and it was pretty fun to see. And I was really excited, mainly for Adrien and all of us, but mainly for Adrien and for Brendan, that all that and Hong, and for just that
Yes.
all of that work came together and that was actually being recognized.
Oh, that's so cool. I love that you watched the announcement. And it's, I mean, God, because it starts with W, it's kind of the last one that got read out, right? So you're like waiting, waiting.
Well, it's funny because I'm not a really reactive person right away. I'm always a little on the shy side. So my husband was watching on FaceTime with me and
Mm.
I was like, "Oh, wow." He goes, "Oh, nice response." He goes, "Way to be excited."
Cool as a cucumber.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I would love to hear more about the character Charlie.
Yeah.
So makeup and hair wise, from research and development, like through to daily application. So if you can talk us through that, that'd be awesome.
It was kind of interesting because Darren, from what I read in the interviews that he gave, Darren Aronofsky, our director, this is the fifth time that I work with him. And he said in interviews that he was the second call that he made after they had signed on Brandon on the show. So I don't know if that was the truth, but anyway, he gave me a call and we were right at the beginning of the pandemic. And so everything was shut down. We were really uncertain of how things were going to develop in the future. And Darren always works with the same group of people. Like it's always the same group of collaborator, whether
That's
it's
cool.
yeah, because it becomes a family over the years. So whether it's a production designer, the makeup team, the OP, so it's always the same group. And he was Adrien. We have a golden opportunity here with the pandemic that just arose. And I was like, oh, what is that? Well, I have a small project that's based on a theater play that has like a very small cast, and I would like to shoot that really quickly. I would like to shoot that in 5 weeks, and because the whole group is available right now, all their production's been shut down, so everybody's available. Can we do this? And I was like, well, what is it? And then he sent me the script, and he sent me a link to a version of a theater play from which the movie was based on. So I quickly glanced at the theater play. And then I read the script and I was like, whoa, okay, that's pretty involved. But immediately my mind went into sort of like troubleshooting mode because I was like, well, 5 weeks, how can we do this? And I was like, okay, we could use all the kind of tricks that you've seen in countless movies before, like the long sleeves, the high collar, some sort of like a crude padding underneath. And I was like, well, maybe we could do something like that. So I started like putting pictures together as a basic research, as I always do. So sort of like do a lookbook, if you will,
Yeah.
that I could send Darren so that we could start our conversation with that. And then like I'm pretty well versed in terms of makeup history and what's been done because that's all I do in my life. I'm a complete nerd loser that I have no life other than makeup. So I
don't know if that comes into the category of loser, Adrien.
I'd say no.
It sounds more like it's a passion.
Yes, very, very, very much so.
Yeah.
But you know what? I've been doing this for 30 years. I could have cured cancer 3 times over, and I just did monsters and makeup for movies. I don't know which category that qualifies for us. But anyway, I started looking at all the makeups that were done that were somewhat similar to what we had to do for the movie.
Mm.
And it was like, although I knew most of those makeups very well, something that I'd never noticed really came super clear immediately. I was like, oh my God, like all of those movies where those kind of makeups have been done in the past were always done where the character, it was always like a crude comedy,
Right.
so to speak, where the character was the butt of the joke most of the time, or it was a sci-fi movie or horror movie where it's going to be the X-Men where the character is the blob kind of thing. Once in a while, there's going to be like some sort of historical recreation of sorts. But even then, that doesn't happen too often. And not to the extent of what Charlie was. And I was like, oh my God, this is crazy that this is always the circumstances in which those kind of characters have been portrayed before. And it wasn't the case at all with The Whale, which I assume you've watched. It's far from that. So that became like immediately very scary. Not only the fact that the character that we had to do, even before talking a little bit more with Darren, was like the character was the main character in the movie. The movie is not a comedy of sorts. It's a heavy drama where our main actor plays with a small ensemble cast. So he's the only one that's wearing heavy prosthetics. And so the makeup that we had to do, no matter what we would end up designing, it's weird to say that, but it cannot attract attention. It can't be distracting in any way by either being like, wow, look at me, how good this is, or like which would be good but bad in this case, or like if the makeup is bad, that's also bad. It needs to be in a situation where you get into the movie starts, you see him. It might be a bit of a shock to see Brendan Fraser looking like that, but within a minute you need to forget about it. And it's no longer about the makeup or what he looks like. It's about the character and what he's going through during that week, and this quest for redemption. So it needs to be like that. Then I spoke with Darren the following day after reading the script, and I was like, okay, so what do you want to see? And he was like, well, we've been working already for months with a group called Obesity Action Coalition, if I remember the name well. And they had given them plenty of notes about people who live with obesity and how they dress, the conditions they live in, often when they're that morbidly obese, all sorts of little notes. And they wanted to make sure that the movie was done right and wouldn't fall in the same kind of tropes that other movies have portrayed people living with that condition before. So they want to make sure that it was done right and done respectfully and with empathy, and because the movie is all about that. It's about redemption and empathy and finding like faith in one another and all that stuff. So they didn't want this to be a joke. And one of the things that Darren told me was, from all the studies that we've made with that group and what the studies that we've made here at Protozoa, which is this production company, very often people who live alone with that condition end up having like clothes that are very sort of loose and with short sleeves, and often they wear like either jogging pants that are like shorts kind of thing. So there's a lot of skin exposed, and there's no like high collar on the clothes because it's hard for them to get in and out. So the less clothes possible is better. Stuff with a loose collar around it makes it easier for them to take it above their head. So all of that stuff. And I was like, oh wow. And then he started sending me pictures of what they had in mind, and I was like, oh my God, there's no shortcuts here. You can't do what other movies have done in the past.
Nowhere to hide.
There's nothing to hide there. And then he was like, oh, and by the way, there's this scene where I want him to go and take a shower. I was like, what? And I was like, when do you want to shoot this again? And he was like, 5 weeks. I was like, then I got on my knees in front of the phone. You couldn't see me, but I was really begging as I was kind of peeing myself at the same time. And I was like, please don't do this to me. I can't do this in 5. Like, if you do this, you're going to do a disservice to me and your movie. Yeah. We need to get this right. And after talking with the producers, they ended up giving us like 12 weeks to do that, which is not, considering all the technical innovations that we've done for this movie, is not a whole lot. And how many breakthrough in terms of makeup fabrication was, it's not a whole lot, but it's still better than 5 weeks.
Yeah, tricky. Well, do you want to talk a little bit about those innovations, technically what you guys did to make it work?
Sure. There's so much in this movie. I had no idea how much of a breakthrough this movie would be in terms of innovations and new techniques and stuff. For many years, like a lot of makeup effect shops have been working with 3D printing on different levels. So I'm enamored with technology in general, and I'm enamored for all the possibilities that it offers, not only in terms of speed and efficiency, but sometimes like you come up with stuff that it allows you to do things that is unthinkable under normal condition or more traditional means. So I was an early adapter of 3D printing way back like 10, 12 years ago in the early stages of, and we've been using 3D printing for doing different things like fake animals, or for doing dummies, for doing robot stuff like in the movie Megan that just came out recently. But there was sort of like a glass ceiling to obtain subtle character makeup appliances, because for all sorts of technical reasons, there is a consistency in the technology. So if you're doing stuff with 3D printing, because it's not a physical object, you have to rely on how good and consistent your 3D printers are, the kind of resolution that you can obtain with the 3D printing, mixed with a scanner, mixed with the sculpting tools on the computer. There's a bunch of stuff that comes into play, and it makes it very difficult to get like the kind of finesse that a subtle character makeup requires, in terms of not only in terms of sculpting, but just like stuff as simple that we take for granted with more analog methods. Like the thin edges that blend into the skin. With clay, it's easy. You just, well, sort of, if you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
But you can spread the clay thin enough onto your positives so that it becomes as thin as a butterfly wing kind of thing, or it vanishes into nothing. And then once you mold your piece, if you've done your sculpture right and the mold is accurate with molding materials that are stable enough, then your pieces are going to be a perfect reflection of what your sculpture was, and then you'll get thin edges. With the computer, because of the fact that you're sculpting the computer, then you need to make sure that it accurately prints it out at the right scale, and that your resolution of printing, and that the materials you're going to be printing with, and that your printer is not going to warp, and same thing with your positive, and all those pieces are going to fit together properly, and then that you're going to be able to get pieces out of this. Like I said earlier, like a bit of a glass ceiling to obtain there. And I thought that everybody was sort of working on that, and everybody in every shop were doing that with those kind of methods for a while, and that was like late in the game. But we've been doing very successful character makeup that were sort of like in-house tests for the past like 2-3 years. But like I'm a bit of perfectionist, and every time I was like, well, like we can get better, and on the right project we will use that for a real film and not just like tests that we do for ourselves. And then the whale arrived, and because we were at the beginning of the pandemic, we didn't have access to Brendan. The producers were like, no, you can't really we can't fly him into your shop to do a live cast or body cast. We can't do that. And I was like, well, what are we gonna do now? Okay, can we scan Brandon? Can somebody go at this house, and we're going to scan Brendan, and I'm going to try something here. It's never been done before. We're going to do this in 3D. And they were like, well, what do you mean 3D as a CGI? No. I'm going to do all the sculpture. I'm going to do everything in 3D. And then I'm going to do molds from those sculptures, and then those 3 sculptures, and we're going to do prosthetics from that. And in the back of my mind, I was like, well, this is a movie for Darren. If I completely fail, I'll he's going to forgive me and maybe call me back for his next project, maybe. And anyway, it's a small movie. Nobody's ever going to hear about this one. So if I fail, like it's no big deal. I called Dan Schrecker, Darren's usual VFX supervisor, and I called him up, and I'm like, Dan, do you have a scanner at your place or at your studio that you could lend Jeremy, our producer, and so that you could go and meet with Brandon, so that you could go meet Brandon, scan him, and then they can send me the data, which Jeremy did. He went and he scanned Brandon in his garage entrance with his dog running around. It was like the tail of the dog that I had to erase from the scan. The scan was a bit crappy, and it's okay. With the reference pictures that he took, I was actually able to get something that was very reasonable and able to work from. So I did the sculptures based on those scans, and I was able to do all the 3D printing. I'm jumping ahead a little bit here, but so we finished the movie anyway. And I thought, I was like, okay, well, everybody must be doing that. And the more employees that were coming to my shop afterwards, new employees that are used to work in all different studios around town, and they were coming to my shop. They were like, oh my God, what are you guys doing here? Like, what are all this? How many printers do you have? Like, what's going on? This is like NASA here. And I was like, what? And that was systematic. Everybody that was coming to the shop were telling me that. And I was like, oh, well, clearly nobody else seems to be using 3D printing the way we do, But what made me realize even more that that was really out of the ordinary was I was just talking about Megan like a few minutes ago. And we shot that in New Zealand. And while I was in New Zealand, Richard Taylor of Weta reached out to me and was like, "Oh, you're in town. Why don't we have dinner?" So I went to have dinner with Richard. And like if you think of a company that's at the forefront of technology and any sort of advancement like that, it's Weta Workshop. They're unbelievable, the work they do over there and stuff. And I started talking about this little movie that we had just finished with Darren, which was The Whale. And I started showing images of the work that we had done, and he was floored by the quality of the work. But then I started talking about how we made the prosthetics, thinking like, of course, here at Weta, they do that all the time. That's so 2015, you guys. And they were like, "You did what? How? We've been trying to do this for years. How did you do this? This is unbelievable." And I was like, "Oh my God, I need to shut up right now. This is the first." And I was like, "Whoa, okay." And then I realized what we had here. And I was like, "Okay, well, if the movie goes anywhere, I'll start talking about it at that point."
Yeah.
Then there's the way the body prosthetics were constructed. People who've been doing those kind of makeups in the past have been using foam latex for the most part when it comes to doing the body for a multitude of reasons. Because it looks enough like skin, it moves fairly well, but the weight of the makeup, like the body prosthetics of that size, would be inconceivable if you were to do something like that in silicone.
Yeah.
Already, like a foam latex body prosthetic of that size, it's already considerable in weight. Having done stuff like that in the past, you already think of like a 30 to 50 pounds easily, and that's heavy. But because I was like, well, I want to do something that's going to have like a consistency in terms of look, that's going to have the same kind of skin quality as the face and the extremities will have. Why don't we try to do this out of silicone, the full thing? That's one of those bad, good ideas kind of thing. It sounds good on paper, but then you do it and it brings tons of problems. And I truly realized the size of the blunder there by when we demolded the first casting that we got out of the mold, even cored out at we had done a skin that was cored at a quarter of an inch. So it's pretty thin. And we had built like an entire substructure. It was also interesting because we, in order to get like the right amount of movement, like some people in the shop were suggesting, well, we could do like styrofoam pellets, which is often what's been used in those kind of paddings. And somebody else said, oh yeah, I've seen people using glass beads. Somebody else suggested beans, dry beans. And we tried all of that. And then one of the guys that was working in the undersuit structure suggested like something called Orbeez, and those are sort of gelatin pellets that you immerse in water. They kind of blow up into like, they look like little gel of like gel marbles.
Yeah, I think I've seen them. They're crazy.
Yeah. You can pot plants in that, and now there's Nerf guns even that you can shoot that, and it's pretty cool. And the thing that's great is that they have the weight, and they also move like masses of flesh because if it's encapsulated. And so we did tests with that. And then we started building the entire like substructure that would go underneath the body prosthetics with that. And it was amazing. It really moved well. But the problem is that because it's water filled, we did a mix of water and glycerin, so it wouldn't just like rot with time. But the problem with that is that it's super heavy, especially at the size that we had. So we already had like a 50, 60 pounds just for that understructure that moved well. And then we had that skin. We opened up the mold. I was, oh, wow. Yay, great. That looks great. And then we opened up the front. I was, oh my God, this is a beautiful piece. And then I opened up the bag, and then it plopped on the floor, and I lifted it up, and I was, Jesus Christ. I was like, what are we going to do? This is insane. Nobody's going to wear this. Yeah. And at that point, we were at 2 weeks before the shoot. There was no going back, and that's what it was.
So how heavy is this, Adrien, all of this together?
So the full thing, like I said, the substructure is about between 50, 60 pounds. Yeah. Each arms were 15 pounds each. Which doesn't sound like much, but try to lift up 15 pounds. The legs were 40 pounds.
Wow.
The head was maybe 5-6 pounds. With the chest and back, that was probably somewhere around between 225 to 250 pounds. 250 pounds.
Wow.
It's insanity. Nobody else would have gone through that and not not give me a serious beating. But Brandon was incredibly patient. And much to my surprise, we also did like a lightweight version of the prosthetics. And that was, we designed those for when Ellie comes and visits him. So like at the beginning of the movie, you see him like he's a bit unkempt. He has like a unshaved beard. It's like his hair is a little bit all over the place. And then that's the famous scene where he takes a shower. And after that, the first time that Ellie comes and visits him, he's a little bit more covered. He cleaned up himself. And we were like, for those days, we can have the lightweight version. And in the morning where we were doing that makeup, Brandon came in. I don't remember what time we started. Like it was ours around like 3:30 or 4 in the morning.
Yeah.
So Brandon shows up and we're like, Brandon, we have a surprise for you today. We've been shooting for a few weeks at that point. And I'm like, we have a surprise for you. We have a lightweight version of the body prosthetics. You're going to be happy. You don't have to suffer all day. And he was like, oh, really? Okay. So we tried it on really quickly and we took it off and we started doing his makeup on his face. And then we finished the makeup and Annemarie walked in and she glued in the wig and she did Brandon's hair. And then we were like, okay, let's get you in in your cool suit and the body prosthetics. And he was like, you know what? We're going to go with the normal one. And I was like, huh? Why? And then he was like, well, I'm not going to move the same way. This is not Charlie. I've found the character with the work that you've done, and switching that today is going to throw me off.
Yeah, he'd been using all that weight that he was carrying to his advantage, I suppose.
That's right. I found that in some way kind of rewarding to see that a brilliant actor like Brandon, who was giving such a performance day after day, that the work that you've done is actually, he's using it as a tool to create the amazing performance that he's doing. And that's almost the biggest reward that I've had on this movie.
I love that, Adrien. That's so cool. And what a journey to go on to get to that point. That's very cool. Annemarie, do you want to talk a bit about the wig? Like, is it a full wig or a partial, or what were you doing?
Well, the first thing I wanted to say was that my experience was a little bit different at the beginning. I met with Darren on Zoom and we talked about I had read the script and I had never worked with him before. And I really liked all of his attention to detail. And he explained to me very briefly about what was happening. So when I first arrived, I knew that Brendan was going to have his head shaved. And I also knew he'd be wearing a wig and partial prosthetics, but I had no idea that it was so extensive and what was happening. And when I got there, I could not believe my eyes. I could not believe how much work that Adrien and his team did and just how great it looked. And it was just unbelievable to me. And then, of course, I became like extremely nervous because I had never really put a wig over prosthetics like that, and learned really quickly that I didn't want to, compromise like what he was doing. Or sometimes, when you put a wig on, you sort of play around with it and you sort of get the feel for where it belongs on the head and how it works. And I did have a wig we had made. We played around with a couple of them first. And then what worked best for me is that I wanted it to be placed in just the right spot because it was not a lot of hair. And we used some of Brendan's own hair on the top of his head and blended it in with, it was originally one piece. And I kept trying to fit it to the right, over the back of his neck and over the back of his head, and then trying to get it in the right spot on his temples. And probably by day 2, I just cut the thing into 3 pieces. And I was like, okay, this is going to be the best way for me. So it was one piece that I cut into 3 pieces. And the back part of the wig, I like to put on first so that I could have, see where I was at. And then I could always line up the temples on each side and then sort of blend it. And then where there were seams, I had cut it so that the seams would be behind his ears, and then covered the little seams with the extra hair that was there on the wig. And so that was a lot easier because I didn't have to play around with the glue, and I was very afraid to ruin any of their work at all. Once you put glue on something and you try to move it or remove it, then obviously I'm going to compromise what he did underneath. And That was terrifying to me. So I didn't want to do, I did that one day. One day I tried to move something and I learned really quickly. I was like, oh no, this is not happening.
Once it's down, it's down.
Yes. So
Yeah.
that really worked out a lot better. And then after, Adrien was very accommodating and really was helpful. We sort of did some airbrushing, a little bit of airbrushing around to fill in some of the spots and to make it really look realistic. And he sort of gave me my space a little bit. I think he knew I was terrified. And then in the end, to finish it, Darren wanted his hair to be very thin once he looked at Brendan, and he kept saying, I don't know, I think thinner. I think a little thinner. I think thinner. And I had already shaved a lot of all of the hair on his sides so that the prosthetics would fit over it. But then on the top, he kept saying, could you take a few more pieces out? Could you just take a little more out? No, this was his own hair and then part of the wig. So I just kept tweezing out hair. And then I went to my nose trimmers and trimmed out more hair until we just made it really like a very fine comb over.
That's awesome. So when you say tweeze, you're not tweezing his hair out of his head, right? You're talking about the hair out of the wig.
No. She was tweezing out like hair one by one on the top of Brenda's hair.
Seriously?
The head, yeah.
Oh my
yeah.
God.
One by one, yeah.
He's a trooper. Oh my goodness. That sounds like some type of torture routine.
Yes.
Well done. You keep him occupied, like, look over there. Bang, bang, bang. That's awesome.
He was so good with everything. He just was like, oh, it's okay. Don't worry. Just keep going. I was like, meanwhile, I'm having a breakdown.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, well done. Oh my goodness. Yeah, you'd have to stay strong doing that one for sure. So each year I always look at the nominees and I'm just like looking at all these different films and I'm like, it's all art, but it's so many different mediums that everybody's kind of working in with the hair and makeup side of things. So I'm always interested to kind of get a feel of how you guys feel your work is different from the fellow nominees this year.
I'm in awe of all the work that's being done from all of. I'm a fan of all those makeup artists to start with. Yes, absolutely. Like it's all there's a reason why all those people are there.
Yeah,
it's all brilliant work. And even like when you go to the Bake Off, you look at each one of the reels and you're like, oh my God, we don't stand a chance. Look at how good all that work is. And so what do we have this year? We have Black Panther. So Black Panther, like obviously, it's what we're doing is very different. The Elvis, there's some similarities, but it's again. It's a bit different, not only like in terms of technology that we've used. Same thing with the Batman. It's a bit similar, but not entirely. Then All Quiet on the Western Front is completely different than any of the other nominees. So how is it different? It's different just for all the breakthrough in terms of technology used, and also the other thing is that our movie, if I'm not mistaken, is we're the only movie where the main character is covered really from head to the tip of their toes and prosthetics, and where that makeup, like I was mentioning at the very beginning, cannot be a distraction or attract attention, or it's not trying to. And it's even more difficult when you're not trying to recreate some sort of a historical character, because it needs to be this anonymous character, which is Charlie, that you never heard until you make the journey of walking to the movie theater and watch what is his own journey. So he's your next door neighbor. He needs to look like the everyday man, well, so to speak, in a way that although he's that covered in prosthetics, you need to completely buy it and believe that character. And that's probably where it differs from everybody else. Yeah. He's not trying. And that I find is extremely hard to pull off. So it's not only the differences in terms of like the technology that we've used, but it's also doing a makeup that's almost as perfect as I could get it on a daily basis, so that it requires little to no CG cleanup afterwards. It looked like what you see on screen, that's the way it looked in person. It was a very clean makeup, and if it wasn't for his body size, that's a bit out of the ordinary. Obviously, you would have seen Charlie walking down in a shopping mall, and you wouldn't have looked at it twice. You wouldn't have thought of him of wearing a makeup of prosthetics. It looked that real to the naked eye.
Well answered. And the movies are all so completely different from each other. They're all different genres. They're just completely
that's right.
different. So, Annemarie, I would like to hear from you is what your biggest challenge was during filming.
I think the biggest challenge was to be able to, like what I had said about putting the wig and splitting, making that decision to make the wig into 3 pieces so that it could accommodate, the way his head moved, and being able to show, so that it would allow for, you could still see the movement in his neck and it wouldn't like lift up, because he had quite a bit of not padding, but silicone under there. So I wanted the hair to move as if it was growing out of his head, not just like, oh, here's your wig and it like bumps up. I think one of the differences of our movie to other movies too, when you, with everyone that's worked behind the scenes a lot, we all always work together. But I feel like with this, it was almost like creating music in some weird way, for lack of a better way to describe it. Like everyone had to really work together. Like each person's piece worked with the other person's piece. So Adrien and his team did so much work. And like there were, at most times, there was 5 of us on top of Brendan at all times, moving everything. And then I really do feel like Darren was like a conductor, like waiting for everybody to have their portion done and happy with what they were doing at that moment before he shot it. And I really think that that's a really unique experience. I think that we all get our time a lot of times when you're working, and everybody has their own time, and then your working time with other people. But with this, it was just different because it was, Adrien wanted it to be so realistic, and we all wanted it to be realistic. And to make that happen, it all had to come alive together. And that took everyone working together to make that happen, I feel.
Yes.
So throughout your prep and shooting, is there a standout lesson that you feel like you learned, Adrien?
And don't do prosthetics out of silicone for the entire body. Potential career suicide. Well, the biggest lesson here is really, it's not so much about the work that we've done. It's truly the way people living with obesity have been portrayed in movies before. That's truly the biggest lesson out of this entire project. And it's very interesting to be working on a project like The Whale, not only like because of the subject of the movie, just the title calls you to analyze your own bias views on the subject, and it's so that's the biggest interesting thing for me about this movie. I never thought that I would get that kind of lesson out of a project, but I remember like in the last few days of the shoot thinking, never, like now that this movie is going to be out, never in the future can movies like what we've seen in the past be done. It's not going to be accepted. It's a complete change of attitude that will be commended by the release of this movie.
I like it. And it's I mean, we always want to learn something and take away something from our experiences. So that's really awesome. I like it. We all know that it takes a team to get this stuff done. So now is your time to do a shout out to all of those that helped you on the project. So take it away.
Yes. Well, I couldn't have done this movie without my partner, the co-owner of the studio here, Kathy C., who has supervised all the hair work at the shop, supervised the fabrication of the body prosthetics. She was on top of it from day one. Helped me applying the makeup daily on set. Did it with me. Helped Brendan getting into the body prosthetics. Stayed with me at night doing all the repairs. Repunched hair one by one. She was there all the way through. Couldn't have done it without her. Chris Gallagher, who came to the rescue and gave us a hand applying the makeup as well. Michelle Bougie at the shop was my right-hand man in terms of art direction. And Shane Shishborn on set that helped us getting Brendan in and out of the body prosthetics and help Brendan all throughout the day, pushing him around and helping him going to the bathroom. Thank God for all those.
Yeah, amazing. Annemarie?
Well, I'd like to say Judy Chin is the person that brought me. She was the makeup department head, and she had worked with Darren on all of his films also. And she's the one that asked me if I would work with them. And introduced me to Darren. And I felt that she was really supportive of me during the time, like when I was like a little bit nervous about the prosthetics and the things that how the wig had to go over it. And she was very patient and just led me like a little bit of confidence at the time. Robert Pickens had made the wig, and Katie Gell came and did measurements for him to be able to make that. And I think that's it.
That's awesome. I love it. Okay, guys, so a massive congratulations again. Being nominated for an Oscar is pretty cool. So enjoy the ride, and thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
For links to see more about our guests, go to our Instagram at The Last Looks Podcast or our website, thelastlookspodcast.com. If you want to keep up with new episodes being released, be sure to subscribe through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, Google Play, YouTube, or any podcast streaming platform. And remember, if you're enjoying the show, share it. The Last Looks Podcast would like to thank Brett Stanley and Sabrina Castro. The song Fun Time by DJ Quads. Thanks for listening. Until next time.
That's a wrap, people.